Good evening and welcome. I'm Dr. Basil Considine. Normally, I'm joining from our Minnesota Igloo satellite, which surprisingly is not the most northerly satellite of ACU because we actually have a faculty member in Alaska. But to try and once and more jump to the top of the ranks, I am joining from ACU's new satellite location in Cuzco, Peru, which is close to Machu Picchu, llama and alpaca farms, and other fun things like that. So today we're going to be talking about multi-subject interviews. And we're going to be doing that through the lens of an assignment coming from FAMO 356. So this is the healthy couple interview topic. Now, we're going to be using that as our focus and starting point, but it is the starting point because ultimately what we're going to be talking about how to write and plan interviews in APA style involving more than one subject. So with no further ado, let's dive in. So this assignment that's our reference point is coming from the Sexuality and Intimacy course. And this assignment happens to involve interviewing a healthy couple. And it begins with a preamble about the purpose of this assignment. Through this assignment, you will have an opportunity to talk to a couple in your life whose relationship you feel is healthy and thriving, identifying what makes their relationship healthy. Okay, good guiding points. So we need to identify a couple that you think is healthy and thriving because they might have been healthy at one point and things have gone down the tube, or they might be thriving but not healthy. So we want to know those two characteristics first, and then see what is getting them there, what is keeping them there. And then we have a few more particular instructions. Choose a couple in your life who you think is a great example of a healthy relationship and interview them about that. And you may come up with your own questions based on the reading material from this week. For example, you might ask, what makes the relationship so great? What do they attribute to the success of their relationship? And how have they handled hardships? And I suggest doing this interview either in person or by video chat, being sensitive to any safety concerns you or your interviewees might have. I don't know about the particular couple and where they're setting. There are many details about private lives that you don't want to say be talking about in a coffee shop where anyone can overhear or on a street corner or something like that. So keeping privacy in mind and protecting the participants' privacy in person in a private location. It could be a private room. It could be in their house, your house, or video chat where they are otherwise in a private location. Okay. And then ultimately, you're going to write a 3 to 5 page papers that will be summarizing the interview process with any insights and reactions you had from conducting the interview. Now, I want to note some things that we have marked here. First of all, this is not saying to just give the transcript for the interview. It is saying to summarize the interview. So you're going to be giving key details that could include some choice quotations and paraphrases, but for the most part, summarizing, so condensing, and that you're going to be giving your insights and reactions. Now, for privacy reasons, the instructor has specified, don't record the interview, don't upload a video of it. You are supposed to summarize it. And then we have this note at the bottom that is a very important thing to keep in mind, especially if you are thinking that research with interview subjects might be in your future. As with all ethical research, you need to inform your participants about your assignment. In other words, don't just say, hey, you seem to get things worked out. Can I just pick your brain about what makes your relationship so great? You can certainly start with that, but you do need to tell them before the interview that you are going to be writing about them in the assignment. And ask if on those terms, they're willing to talk with you. And only after that's taken place, set up a time to do so if they agree. Now, if you're looking at this webinar from the lens of being a doctoral student who is preparing to do their capstone or their dissertation, this is mirroring the process where you need your IRB approval and you need informed consent before you are allowed to start gathering data or even scheduling interviews. So the consent comes first. The care to ensure that this is ethical research, and the interview is research, that comes before you do any of the gathering or other logistics. So assure them of your confidentiality with their identities and that their names will be changed in the assignment you turn in. I will say that in my time, I have noticed a few embarrassing things where a student has accidentally written this people's real names and then forgotten to change them. So it's always best to just never write their real names in your paper in the first place and just give them pseudonyms and use those pseudonyms in the data collection as well. All right, so how is this being graded? Well, let's take a look at what we have here. So first, you have to actually conduct the interview and have summaries of this, things about them. You also need to ask thoughtful questions related to the course material and specifically identify markers of health. How do you know what the markers of health are? Well, that's the course reading to this point has pointed out some of those. And when you're discussing those, you can certainly and should cite that reading. Besides generally strong writing and APA requirements and of the appropriate length, there are some others here. So note that they say syntactically mature or sophisticated sentences with variation in length pattern, et cetera, et cetera. So that's saying, don't just report, oh, they said this. Unpack that. What does that mean? Does that relate with any of the markers of health? Any advice that's being given by the different authors in the two course texts? Things like that. So don't just report, give the reader insights into what these things that were told to you, what they mean, what their significance is. And if you're still not sure what to ask about, you can always look at the course syllabus and see over these, not just week 5, but the weeks coming to that, what are the things that are being discussed and how do these appear or not appear in this couple's life, and ask them questions about that. Being a happy couple does in no way, shape, or form mean that you don't have sexual issues. Being a happy couple does not mean that there are no or have never been any issues with biases or personal beliefs that did not align or cause trouble. And even in the happiest of couples, age will eventually come and cause some issues with some things. So those are all things that you might ask depending on the age of the couple, the length of their marriage, and if you feel that you need to gather additional information other than what was immediately volunteered. And just for your convenience, I have transcribed some of those things here. All right, now let's talk about how to cite and quote from an unpublished interview in APA style. And for this, I do want to point out that we are talking about how APA style refers to unpublished interviews. That's going to come back in a moment. So normally in APA style, we have the citations telling us, okay, who wrote it, when was it published, and sometimes, like if it's a video or we're doing a direct quote, where to find it. But that's about published sources. We're talking about an interview that you're doing just for this course paper right now, and you're submitting the course paper doesn't qualify for what APA style defines as publishing. So what do we do when you are using an unpublished interview? Well, we don't use a formal author date citation. Instead, before you start quoting, paraphrasing, summarizing the interviews, you want to introduce the interview subjects with any key information. What's key information? That is quite simply any information that will change how the reader perceives whatever comes afterwards. So for example, if you have someone saying, oh yeah, I really recommend that you do this piece of maintenance, and it's from an insurance adjuster for homes that have had bad things happen to them, you might weight that more strongly than your neighbor who does nothing related to home maintenance normally. So any key information, in this case, it's going to probably include things like, oh, what did the couple do? Like, do they both work? Is one homemaker or caretaker? Do they have children? How long have they been married? All these dynamics that may shape our understanding of what is reported and who these people are. Now, if you're wondering what information goes into that, I have here an extract from page 83 of the APA Manual 7th edition, where it says, oh, yes, you should describe the procedures for selecting participants. All right, so how do you know this couple? What made you think, yes, they have healthy a relationship? That might be they came immediately to mind because of some reasons. Well, tell us those reasons. Now, if you are doing a study and you have a formal process for recruiting many participants, that doesn't mean that you won't have this described here, because there will be criteria. Even when you're using a convenience sample, saying, oh, I recruited these people because they were in my social circle and I thought I could get participants, that would be your procedure for selecting participants. So in this case, tell us why this couple. Did you ask 10 and they were the last one that said? And were they your number one pick? Yeah, whatever that is, tell us. And remember, this is a 3 to 5 page paper, and you want the reader to understand what gives weight to these people's remarks that you're summarizing and discussing. You should also include the settings and locations in which the data were collected. So like if this is in the living room of the house and their kids are away, okay, great, good to report. If this was to take place in a public setting like a cafe, you should also report that. It might not be ideal for research gathering because of the reticence for saying things that people might overhear, but it's important to let the reader know that that was something that may potentially have affected things. So continuing through there, dates. Okay, yes, when did this take place? If you had, 3 hours of discussion over 2 weeks that you're condensing, that's a little different than a 15-minute chat. So when did this take place? Any agreements with? Will that include anonymity? Payments made? Well, please don't pay the participants for this. There are some studies in which you would, but in this case, please don't. And then ethical standards, well, that's going to include protecting their identities. So how might this look? Well, you might have a write-up like, I asked my next door neighbors and longtime family friends, and if I was grading this, I would say, there's a problem there. Even if you're using pseudonyms for them, saying that they're next door neighbors, all we need to do is find out where you live, and then we've got a pretty good idea of where they live and thus who they might be. So don't include so specific details that it is easy to identify the participants. When you are anonymizing them, we start with being a little bit ambiguous about, for example, where they're located. So don't say we did the interview in their house at 194 Bellevue Street in El Paso. That would not be protecting their anonymity. But so longtime family friends, okay, sure. Carl and Linda pseudonyms. All right, that's fine. Because they've been married for 35 years or around 35 years. Sure. The interview took place on May 28th. Great. Now we know when it took place. I did not offer any compensation. Fine. Doesn't need to be fancy. Just tells us that you have reported that thing that the APA manual says you should report. And how did you follow ethical standards? You protected them using pseudonyms. Okay. That's all it has to be. And then when it comes to reporting, you can use phrases like, oh, during the interview, participant A or Mary, you can give them a name for the pseudonym. You can just code them as participant A, participant B. Probably will feel smoother on the tongue if you use a name, a pseudonym there. Participant B emphasized the importance of this. Both members of the couple identified this as an important factor. So that's something that people often forget, that it is quite possible, quite doable to not just summarize one person's remarks, but since you're interviewing a couple, to point out where they are in agreement. Now, we spoke briefly earlier about that syntactically mature, sophisticated sentence requirement for full credit. And that's where you start not just reporting, but adding some analysis. Like if they state something multiple times, point that out and unpack what you think the significance might be. And that can include your aligning their remarks with things from the course readings. That, oh, they said this was very important to the relationship, which is actually on that author's list of things. Or both members of the couple separately identified something as an important factor. Ah, okay, and then tell us what you think that means. Now, this next bit is less for the assignment and more for just interviews in general. If you are conducting interviews, you want to make sure that you are asking for consent to write about it. Now, for classroom assignment, this usually doesn't require that you go as far as getting an informed consent form signed. But if you are doing research that is slated towards publication, including a doctoral study or dissertation, I've included a link to the application for ACU's Institutional Review Board that would approve human subjects research. They've also included a sample informed consent form for social sciences research. All right, we're going to finish with one of those anchor things for how to make sure that you are grounding your discussion in the course reading, and so you're having the complex and syntactically mature and sophisticated arguments and in your write-up of the interview. And for that, we have our two course texts. So there's the Penner and Penner book, The Gift of Sex, A Guide to Sexual Fulfillment, and you would cite them as Penner and Penner, 2003. As you can see here, Penner and Penner, 2003, emphasize the importance of recognizing that many people do not understand or even know of their own sexual needs when they get married. Or, past traumas can have a major negative impact on a couple's intimacy. Penner and Penner, 2003. Our other main course text is Hyde and Delameter's Understanding Human Sexuality. Do make sure that you include the edition number, because as you can see, this has been a very successful book and it's been expanded in many ways over the years. So Hyde and Delameter 2020 identified this as, or attraction is a multifaceted characteristic of relationships, Hyde and Delameter 2020. And then you'd want to then link that into your discussion of things said in the interview. All right, as far as outlining and drafting, I think this assignment is fairly straightforward. You want to introduce your subjects, and going through those APA guidelines from earlier, well, that's going to include things like why and how you recruited them, how you interviewed them, summarizing the general interview content and flow. And then at that point, it's on you to choose what system you're going to use to organize the discussion. And whether it's this course paper or whether you're writing up interviews or focus group remarks for doctoral research, you're going to want to come up with a system that is logical and practical for what you're doing. Sometimes it's short enough or clear enough that you can go question by question. And so, I ask them these exact words, or I ask them about this thing, and then discuss those. Or you could sort it by themes or by things that surprised you weren't expecting. And that's not the entirety of it. Those are just some starting points that you could use to organize a larger body. And then you're going to want to have some sort of overall reflection where you discuss, well, okay, so given all these things, I interviewed the couple. I went ahead and I summarized some of their remarks. I talked about what they meant or what their significance was, perhaps in relation to the reading. And then we get down to this question of, okay, you conducted the interview. You've asked thoughtful questions and identified the markers of health. It'd be really good to have a paragraph that summarizes those markers of health. And then a conclusion. So what are you taking away from this? Do they have advice for other people? Are they giving anything that anchors what was found in the course text? Do they give things that disagree or add something that wasn't there? There's lots of different things. And because you're interviewing real living people, this can go in many different directions. That's one of the exciting things about interviewing participants. You often don't know what you're going to hear from them. So let's just do a recap of what we've talked about today. So we broke down the healthy couple interview assignment, including looking at when you are introducing an interview, what does the APA manual say you should include? We looked at how to cite and quote from unpublished interviews in the APA style. We talked about how to use the instructions as a starting point for outlining and drafting. And then we wrapped up, including some bridges into how to go about starting a research project where you are planning on publishing this. So with that, I think we are at our closing point for today. If you have any questions about APA, head first to our website where we have our APA page, links to our template and other things. Of course, the official publication manual, the American Psychological Association, 7th edition, is a great resource. If you have a quick question, you're not sure about stuff, you can always send us an email at onlinewritingcenter@acu.edu. And you can find many examples for things on the APA style website, that third link. And feel free to make an appointment with us to get help on your writing. With that, I'm going to say thanks for joining us tonight. Have a great evening.